Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode 543, where corridors are just more interesting when you design them yourselves. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Designing any good corridors lately?
No, but I built some shelves.
Oh, nice.
Holly was looking for, we're trying to figure out a way to do it. We had our game shelf downstairs has always been overflowing, and it's 3 shelves hooked to the wall, and it's not really easy to get the board games in and out of there. So Holly was online, she was looking around, and somebody had mentioned on a site she was on that there was this shoe rack on Amazon.com that actually doubles really well for a games shelf. And so we thought, well, okay, and we got it, and it's actually pretty easy to put together. It's tedious because there are a lot of parts, but easy to put together. But the game's looking fantastic. I'll have to show you guys a picture because it's like really cool. I feel like a board gamer now.
Ooh,
Nice.
So you guys watch anything this week?
we did a double feature on date night. We found ourselves sans shy, and we're kind of making plans for a nice quiet evening in, and suddenly went, wait a minute. I mean, it was very much that moment in Bedazzled where Brendan Fraser goes, "Un momento," and so we went out to the theater and saw the new Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
How'd you like it?
Followed that up with Shazam 2. Dungeons and Dragons is awesome. It is just a top-notch, fun, thrilling, exciting, audience-pleasing, good old time at the movies. A lot of laughs, a lot of excitement. It's a good movie. And yes, Glenn, I loved that cameo.
I saw that. My kid was like, "What?" I'll tell you later.
And then Shazam 2 wasn't bad. I mean, it was in that vein of cute, since it doesn't have quite the same level of heaviness to it that it seems like most superhero movies have. But neither did the first one. But it was enjoyable. So yeah, we
Part
had a
of
good
what I
time.
enjoyed of the first one, it was a little more mindless entertainment.
Yeah, very much. This one fits right in that more of the same. So they were enjoyable.
Keith, what'd you watch?
I didn't watch anything. Started a couple things, not finished them yet, so not going to comment on them until I see them all.
My youngest has been bugging me about seeing the 1993 Super Mario's movie, the Mario Brothers movie. So Sean was able to help us out, get a hold of that, and we watched that on Saturday. And that movie's not as bad as people make it out to be.
How did it go?
I'm a bit. Well, he liked it. He thought it was. I mean, he thought it was campy fun. He didn't think it was a great movie or anything. But yeah, we both enjoyed it. And I mean, it is such a product of its time. It's just very Demolition Man meets Super Mario Brothers. And just the right amount of campy scenery chewing from Dennis Hopper. Of course, I had seen it before, so this was my second time around.
As a kind of generic sci-fi actioneer, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie, but
Right.
it's just fine. As a Super Mario Brothers film, yeah, it kind of is terrible.
Right. And
Very
Mason,
loose connections
Yeah.
to Super Mario Brothers.
and Mason, appreciated the connections that it had, little mentions it would have, or little things that it related to. And then the other thing we watched, just because we've been meaning to watch it for a long time, was the movie Pixels, which is another one I think people give too hard of a time. It's not a bad film. There's some silliness in it from time to time, but I mean, I had a good time watching it. I don't think the plot is as terrible as people make it out to be. I mean, it's very unbelievable in many places. And I don't just mean pixelated aliens coming down to Earth. I mean, things that happen in it are very unlikely, but I thought it was fun. I think Josh Gad's a little over the top in his characterization, but I liked it. I enjoyed it. It's not at the top of any best movie of all time lists, but it was good. And I know I'm in the minority on that one.
So what other game adaptation movies do you guys have planned?
We want to see it's not a game adaptation. We want to see The Wizard with Fred Savage from the late 80s, early 90s. But we haven't been able to run that one down yet either. So I think that's the only other one we've got on our radar right now.
No Battleship, huh?
No. We might watch Rampage, but Rampage I heard was a lot of fun, but
it wasn't bad.
I liked Rampage.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson,
Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse on shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
I got a Blu-ray in the mail. Actually got it last week, but I didn't have enough time to look at it in order to talk about it until this week. But thought I'd do this as one of our something new 2-minute reviews. I got
a Blu-ray in the mail. What is this? 1990s Netflix?
I got Doctor Who, William Hartnell Complete Season 1, which is what it's called here in Region 1, which is still terrible, but it just insults my intelligence when they change things like that.
You mean Season 2?
What did I say? Season 1?
You said 1.
You did say
I meant
1.
Season 2. Sorry. Well, if I got Season 1, if I got Season 1, I was in on something.
Yeah.
New to you.
Yeah. Shh! Don't tell anybody. Just real quick, it's a great little Blu-ray. It's actually one of the ones I've been looking forward to the most, because the other, Tom seasons obviously are from my era, my favorite Doctor, and I've liked all the all the my era Doctors that I have. I was really excited for this one because I wasn't sure how these would come across. The restoration, the up conversion looks pretty good. What they did on this one with the Crusade is pretty standard. I couldn't tell any different. There's the 2 reconstructed episodes that the BBC put together from Telesnaps, and it's not any better or any worse than the loose cannon adaptation that they did. I haven't been through all of the special features, but I did take a look at some of the new ones. The In Conversation, Matthew Sweet interviews William Russell for one of the in Conversations. I didn't learn anything new about Doctor Who, his time with Doctor Who from that conversation. But what I did find out is that when he starts talking about being in the Royal Air Force, that man opens up. It really opens up. The other one was with Maureen O'Brien, and that one's a really fascinating interview. I did not know that she was a noted writer. She's written some mysteries novels over the years. I also watched a couple of the Behind the Sofa features, which is where the all-star Doctor Who cast watch along some of the episodes that are on this disc set. And then the other thing I got a chance to look at was there's a documentary on here, full-length documentary called Searching for David Whittaker. And I didn't realize that there's not a lot known about David Whittaker. So Toby Haydock sets out on a journey to interview some people about him and about his time with Doctor Who and kind of even his early life before that as an actor. But that's as far as I've gotten. The box art is great. I was a little skittish when I saw when they released it. I didn't think William Hartnell looked all that much like. It looked like William Hartnell, but not. There was something wrong with it. But when I get it in my hand and I look at it, it looks fine. So I don't know what the difference is. Maybe it's a colorization thing or something. But box art
it's
looks
funny
great.
you mention that because I thought that too, looking at the picture of the box art when it was like, why does this look slightly off?
I'm thinking that too when I look at the box art for the new Pertwee one. But I've had a lot of people say when they got in the UK that already have it, when they got it in their hands, they said they thought the same thing, that it didn't look as strange as it did when they first saw it. Maybe I'm just getting used to it. But anyway, that's my something new 2-minute review. I've got some more stuff to delve into on that disc set that we'll obviously talk about when we come around and talk about some of the Blu-ray sets.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitz-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
All right, should we move on to news?
Yes, they have announced Jinx Monsoon is going to be joining the show in the new series in a major role. Now, Jinx is an award-winning actress, singer, and 2-time RuPaul's Drag Race winner. I had never heard of Jinx before today.
She won the 5th season of RuPaul's Drag Race, and then the 7th season of the RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars. So she came back and took that one as well. I think I saw that
Crowned Queen of Queens.
Yeah, I think I saw she just came off of Broadway. She played Matron Mama Morton in the musical Chicago. So
yeah, it looks like that.
Pretty exciting. I don't know that much about her either, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do.
It's more than anything just nice to keep getting tidbits and news about what's coming.
Yeah.
Knowing that, oh yeah, we still have new stuff coming.
Right. Even beyond the 60th anniversary.
Yeah, unlike Chibnall's tight lockdown where we didn't hear absolutely anything.
Right.
Ever. Now we actually get some announcements and stuff, which is kind of refreshing.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
Do you collect Doctor Who? Do you have Doctor Who items and you don't know you collect Doctor Who? For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world, tune in to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, a Direction Point Network podcast. I am Larry Van Rosbergen, your host, and I have been collecting Doctor Who for 40 years. With popular features like collection protection and the most outrageous offer, we have a lot of fun. Available anywhere you get your podcasts. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point Network podcast.
All right, well, should we move on to our review?
Yes, we were going to start with Ambush.
This is a short comic, about 2 pages, 6-8 panels. In the book, Dalek, The Astounding Untold Story of the Greatest Enemies of the Universe by George Mann. It's just really kind of a little splash page. I've noticed that George Mann has sort of taken the War Doctor as sort of his baby, if you notice, because he's written a few things, including Infernal Engines, for the War Doctor. So I think he's sort of taken the reins on some of this, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the War Doctor and War Doctor Begin stuff has been written by him. But pretty much what it says, the Doctor and his, I presume, companion at this time is ambushed by a fleet of Daleks. And he decides that it's time to finally go back to Gallifrey and talk to Rassilon himself.
It feels very much like a setup to another story that I really want.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing, and I wondered, the complete guide, the reason that I put this in the rotation here is because the complete guide that we use has it before the story we listen to. That would be why I put it in that order. But I'm wondering if maybe this goes better after this, although, as we'll talk about when we review the audio, He's been back to Gallifrey. I mean, obviously he's been working in conjunction with that and for Gallifrey, but it sounds like he's been back now actually to Gallifrey proper. So I suppose maybe this could fit where it does, and this is before, this is where he actually goes back in to the planet itself, I know that there's some account in the last story that there were some adventures that happened, let's say off screen, but between actual stories that we're getting, and so this obviously could have been slided in there as well. But what I liked about this is the fact that we get a good look at, and I mean, it's an artist rendering, but it's a very good artist rendering of a young John Hurt, and exactly what I think he would look like at this time, coming off of, fresh regeneration. We've gotten some really good artwork on the covers for the Big Finish audios as well. And so it really kind of drills home how much physically he aged between his regeneration into the War Doctor and then at the end of that particular lifespan. I think it really kind of drives that home. And anyway, I don't know, what do you guys think?
I agree, and it makes me. It's just such a quick little taste that it feels almost like it could be even earlier in his timeline than this, since he also makes the statement along the lines of, well, I guess I got to join the fight more so, or something along those lines. So it while it fits here, it also feels like it could go earlier in his timeline, even shortly after the first box set that they've done. And I have to assume that this was written before any of those actually came out.
Well,
so
it could have been. I don't know. That Dalek book, I think, released in 2019, so it would have been right around the same time.
It made me realize, I remember poring over a Doctor Who annual back in the day that had a Seventh Doctor comic story versus the Daleks. And I reread that thing, I don't know how many times, just because it was awesome. And this really kind of carted me right back to that. And I think I'm of the opinion that comics might be the best medium for Daleks, because you get a bunch of great visuals, and they are imposing villains, and you can do cool things with them visually that maybe you couldn't afford to do on a TV budget, or maybe you couldn't, can't quite realize in an audio format. And because we've had them, on TV and in audio, man, they still sound like Daleks in my head. That's kind of an automatic. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Nick, but they're there. So as far as the plot, it's like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever.
Whoever this companion is of his, we'll never hear of again.
Yeah, stuff's happening. I don't care. The Daleks are blowing things up. I'm happy. So
I looked that up. It's 2017. So yeah, this book.
It was quite.
This
a bit
definitely
before.
would have been out before that. So
because the first box set came out in 21. So
yeah. So we'll move on to. The War Doctor Begins, Battlegrounds.
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The War Doctor Begins, Battlegrounds.
What was your name again?
I'm the Doctor, and don't worry, sooner we sort this out, sooner the planet's safe.
What? Did he say the planet?
It's happening when the beam shines on them.
Snow this side too!
Back! Get back!
They're growing!
Surrounding the cottage.
What's happening out there?
Doctor! It's the rocks!
Mental energy physically affecting solid matter. Even if that worked on water, reshaping rocks so easily. What power it must have access to.
What's she going on about?
No idea. Come on, run!
Run!
You never run up a down escalator?
No!
First time for everything, move!
You believe a Time Lord, who just tried to kill us, by the way, over me?
But where are we going? Where?
Skaro.
We've been fighting this war since we were slime on Skaro.
The Nemesis is a game changer. It could win this war. And we've given it to you, Commander.
A bribe. That's what this great big Hulk is.
I'm a pal, not a Time Lord. We still have honor.
Who was that?
That was your captain, agreeing to give this ship to the Daleks.
Berserker army is currently engaged in a pincer movement around Sendaline and Herrick. Estimated complete loss of all lives in the city by 0630 hours.
You in the cloister, with a big sword. I said you won't want to be standing there.
Me? Me in the cloister? Right you are. Why not?
Well, because the Berserker Dalek advance party has been sent to kill me.
So we run now, right? We run in the direction of the knot explosion.
I just have to unplug all this from the TARDIS. One moment, please. I'll do it as fast as I can.
Need a hand?
I believe it's a one-man job.
I've heard that before.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
The Keeper of the Lights. The Doctor and his faithful companion are on the trail of a strange psionic signals. At a remote coastal cottage, holiday makers David and Dorothy think there's something strange about the lighthouse, but the Doctor can't shake the sense of an even bigger mystery to solve.
I wish there hadn't been a bigger mystery to solve, honestly.
I don't know. I kind of like the aspect of what threw me off immediately is the fact that the companion, Layla, she's calling him the Doctor. And
he calls himself the Doctor.
Yeah, that's right. And he doesn't, say anything about it. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. And then you kind of get the impression that this is taking place, fairly present day Earth. And that's kind of weird. And then there's this relationship between this Dorothy and David and this love triangle that I think David perceived more than actually was there, but with Dorothy and Malcolm. And, it was just, it's kind of, chugging along as a typical Doctor Who story. And I think I was a bit befuddled by, trying to figure out where is this being placed? Why is he on Earth? There's a war going on. What's happening now? So I think the reveal, the aha moment, I didn't expect, but it was a bit of a relief in a way. And I thought was kind of cool because I do like when I'm caught off guard and I don't realize what's happening. And that for the Doctor, when he starts to have the realization before he's actually fully kind of come out of it, as he's working it out, I kind of thought, oh, okay, I see why all of this has happened before. But was that necessary? Because if the story that they had been telling had been just a little more engaging, I think that the story overall would have been even better and the aha moment would have been even cooler. But the story they were telling almost is a contrivance in order to get to that aha moment. And I think that was what I didn't like so much about it.
Yeah, I had kind of a similar course through it, except for I noticed early on that he gave us a drop line of whatever's going on pulled my TARDIS out of the vortex. So I was like, oh, okay, so he was off to some other battle and got pulled down.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where we are. So I didn't struggle so much with fitting this into whatever's going on in the grander scheme, but more struggling consistently with the characterization of this Doctor. Then it makes it okay at the end because, it's all in his mind of him wanting to do what he used to do. But that doesn't it makes the rest of the story almost unnecessary because, it's a fine Doctor Who story that needed a little more thought put into it to make it better. But they didn't have to do that because they had this big aha moment at the end that allowed us to just hand wave. Well, it wasn't real, so it doesn't really matter. And it's, well, why did I just listen to that last hour of this story then?
Mm-hmm.
Also Bing. Yeah, both of those. You guys know me. I love lighthouses. I love Doctor Who in lighthouses.
Mm-hmm.
This should have been so up my alley. And I was kind of there for it. It was like, we're just going to get a kind of standard Doctor Who adventure. Okay, cool. It'll be interesting to see how the War Doctor handles a standard Doctor Who adventure instead of something big and epic and, world ending with Daleks. Unfortunately, it's not a very good standard Doctor Who story. It's just kind of there at best. And then there were two drops when they mention the cross stitch and the Lewis Carroll quote about imagination, that's a dead giveaway that something is wrong. And then he says something in Latin when they get to the lighthouse, which is apparently inscribed above the door, which I don't know Latin, but I recognize the word imagination again. And he doesn't reveal what the quote is. He just says it. And it's like, well, okay, now you're purposely trying to hide this from me. So what is it? Is it the master of fiction? Is it the, toy maker? Is it the who is fiddling with the strings and forcing him to live through this, and why? So through the whole thing, I was kind of waiting for that shoe to drop. So then when it did, it was a cool, oh, okay, until Bobby Ewing steps out of the shower where, it was all a dream and nobody survived, and it didn't matter because they weren't real to begin with. Well, now this is no fun. Now it's just, not only was it kind of a middling adventure, like Keith said, well, why did I sit through it if none of it was real? And I think the biggest problematic crux of it is this feels like something that the War Doctor would need to have happen to him far later in his adventures.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I feel like if he's been slugging away at him for years, subjective time, that getting into a respite like this would be something he genuinely relished and maybe didn't realize how much he needed a break from it. And that's why he was a little dull to come around to things until, oh, wait a minute, I know what this is. And maybe that would have made it different. But here it's like, well, you're still kind of fitting into the role in some ways. And I just don't know that I buy that you're longing for that return to normalcy already when you haven't really left the normalcy yet, because we've seen in so many of the previous stories that he's still acting like the Doctor, even though he won't admit it.
Yeah, but
it wasn't until the last box set that we got a story where he was really kind of, but you did kill everybody. So
I think it's more of that toxin that he was exposed to that tapped into his subconscious, and it sounds like he was lucky to have broke free from it anyway. So I don't know that. I think even his subconscious would have put him in a very comfort-friendly situation that he wouldn't realize that he was in until obviously later. So I don't know that I buy that about it, but everything else you said I agree with.
And he also gives that line about the toxin of the only reason he was able to escape was that he had burned that part of him that would have let him stay in that delusion.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how he gets
so
out.
that it almost feels like it could have been a little sooner in his storyline that, okay, it's him burning away his prior life in order to be the warrior that he needs to be. And I think that this story could have worked a whole lot better had it not let off the box set too. Because the whole time, I'm sure they wanted us to be on our back foot of, well, this doesn't feel like the War Doctor. What's going on here? But it just it kept me from getting engrossed in the actual story, knowing that, wait a minute. Why are they just disregarding everything that this Doctor should have been gone through so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me, there's an episode of the animated Superman series called For the Man Who Has Everything. And it's this kind of bizarre Elseworld story about Superman, and he's living a perfect life with Lois, and they have a kid, and, all the villains have been jailed, and, they're on New Krypton, and everything is just hunky-dory wonderful. And you're kind of wondering, when is the shoe going to drop? What's going on? And then it does, and it's revealed that apparently there was an alien parasite that attacked Clark in the Fortress of Solitude, and Batman had to cut it off of him and be the one to bring him out of it and go, yeah, so I just ripped you away from the only thing that would have made you happy. Sorry about that. And it's just this devastating gut punch of oh, wow. How much does he hate Batman now? It feels a lot like that, but not as well done. Mainly because the Doctor doesn't have a Batman.
Yeah, but he's Batman and Superman in this case.
Yeah.
Well, and I felt that while the actors did a good job, I didn't recognize Emma Campbell Jones's voice when she was doing Layla. I thought she sounded kind of familiar, but don't know her voice well enough. And Adele Anderson put enough of an accent on Dorothy that I didn't recognize her as Tamazan.
Yeah.
And same with Ken Bones, who, who's the bald general dude from Day of the Doctor.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize his voice at all as David. So it's...
Yeah, full props to the cast, because I didn't recognize any of them until I listened to the behind-the-scenes stuff and went, oh, really?
Yeah.
But
because that kind of gave it a Wizard of Oz quality to it. But
yeah, and I wish I could have keyed in on that while listening to it, and that would have made me more intrigued. Well, wait a minute, this isn't real. Giving me the clues earlier on to know that something was up, and probably made me more looking for more stuff in the story, and would have distracted me from the fact that there wasn't as much of a plot.
Yeah.
Entirely possible.
Well, should we move on to the next one?
Please.
Nemesis. Fighting alongside the Time Lords against their common enemy, some Thals have realized this collaboration is not between equals. When his new battleship is stolen, the War Doctor must convince his old allies that they are on the same side.
So there are parts of this that I really dug, but I don't know that it holds together cohesively as a story for most of it.
Why not?
I think we kind of get wrapped up in the machinations of, is the captain a bad guy or not? Is the XO power hungry or not? They kind of drop these clues early on as the story unfolds, and then we've got, 3 times the bridge changes hands, and all of it winds up being dropped because, there's a greater threat, we all have to team together now. And then that threat is, it just culminates almost too quickly. There was no dramatic oomph to that whole part of the story. It was pretty much just a matter of, I liked the idea of the Doctor building this ship, and that this was the ability that it had. It's like, okay, cool. We've got, chameleon technology. It's like cloaking devices. All right, cool. I'm all for this. I love starship porn. That's what this felt like. It's like, okay, great. And then, there's a Time Lord bomb attached to it. And, it just, everything resolved way too quickly. It just felt like there wasn't a big... You gave me a ticking clock, but then we never had the countdown of the ticking clock. Does that make sense? And when we turned it off, it was just an afterthought of, I turned the engine off and now there's no power to the bomb. What?
I don't know. I sort of like...
And a drop line of, we couldn't do that in space because then we'd be dead.
I sort of like that, though, because it kind of... I like that because in her desperation for Tamazan's desperation for him to defuse a bomb that he says that he probably can't defuse anyway, I like the fact that it is something as simple as, hey, now that it's almost like it brings back that element of the Doctor of he's always kind of calculating. He's always a step ahead of everybody else. He's always thinking one step ahead of everybody, which makes him the smartest man, often the smartest man in the room. And so I sort of like the fact that he had that. He never really lied about not being able to disable that bomb. And I don't think he ever could have really disabled that bomb or disabled it from going off, it from detonating. And so I think knowing that he can just pull the plug on the power, I don't know, I kind of like that. I thought it was a nice simple answer, especially when we just came through, I think, some pretty high stakes, intense scene just prior to that. So I actually liked that about this. I didn't think that was too simple.
I think my problem more was it seemed like they escaped the Daleks a little too easily. Because didn't they just dematerialize and escape?
Yes, but because he had tied the ship into his TARDIS, he used
Oh,
the
okay.
fast. He says this. He used the fast
That's
return
right, that's
switch,
right.
and that's why they ended up back in the docking bay on Gallifrey, because he used his fast return switch, which we hadn't heard much about that fast return switch for a long time. So I kind of thought that was a cool little. Oh yeah, I forgot he has that.
What's cool about this story is I hadn't thought about what the Thals were doing during the Time War. Of course, they would have some involvement somehow. And the fact that they enter the war in this way, and the Doctor essentially trying to use them in order to get back behind enemy lines and destroy everybody. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But yeah, because their DNA, they'd be undetectable because their DNA is so similar. Yeah, that was clever.
Yeah, and then the chameleon circuit would allow them to appear like Daleks from the outside.
Right.
Yeah, and all of the ideas of it are really well thought out. It's just gets a little. While the politics of the Thals is interesting, it just starts to get bogged down a little too much in the politics of the Thals.
I think another thing that I liked about it, though, was the fact that, the Thals are it's very characteristic of the Thals, because when you think about it, they've been at war with the Daleks the longest of anybody, even more so than Gallifrey. And so I think that I like the idea of this captain deciding, although going about it the wrong way, but this captain deciding that he just needs a break, and there are a lot of people that just need a break. So if he can broker a deal and get the Thals on the side of the Daleks, at least temporarily, they'll get some downtime, at least till they can regroup and figure out, what further to do. And I think it's very obvious that the Time Lords are taking advantage of the Thals too, and I think they feel that way. So I sort of like that concept of the captain, but I think it gets lost in the whole back and forth of, they snuck out. Oh, wait, the Doctor was on board because he knew they were going to sneak out. Oh, wait a minute. They, were able to get away because the Time Lords let them get away because they're going to set off this bomb behind. I think it just gets a little muddled in all of that back and forth espionage spy element. Who's ahead of who? And so I think that all gets kind of muddled. But I liked the idea of this captain sort of looking out of desperation to do something just to kind of give his people a break.
Yeah, I like that also, but at the same time, they're also been at war with the Daleks for so long, they should know that any respite given by the Daleks is not going to be much of a respite at all.
Well, I think a sane person would, but I don't think this captain was too sane.
That's probably true.
And
he had great motivations, I thought, for why he did all he did. I mean, it wasn't a very well thought out plan on his part, but I liked the reason why he wanted to do all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made you see his point of view.
Yeah. I'm not sure so much about the slap on the wrist at the end, but I suppose the Doctor said he'll have to live with the death, especially his XO's death, for the rest of his life, and that's punishment enough. I suppose maybe that's true, but it still seems a little empty and hollow that he just gets pretty much off scot-free.
Yeah, because he's pretty much the only one that survives, isn't he?
Yeah, he and the Doctor.
Yeah, the XO dies, the helmsman dies, or Gideon, whatever his name was.
Mm-hmm.
Gilder.
All right, not much more to say about this one, so let's move on to the final one in this series, which is probably the strongest.
Rewind. Lacuna is on the brink of destruction, attacked by a new breed of Dalek. But every day it's pulled back from that brink, and everyone prepares to live through the end of their world once again. One strange man, alone in his castle, holds the key to Lacuna's ultimate salvation, or its annihilation.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, I liked this one. Although I'm not quite sure I understood the end, but
I think that's the point of the end.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the best War Doctor Begins story we've had.
Oh, really?
I think I would agree with that.
That's saying a lot. I don't know that I would go that far, but it's certainly up there at the top.
War Doctor Begins, not the actual John Hurt stuff.
Yeah, no, I think in that first, I think I like some stuff in that first box set better than this, but
Go ahead, John.
I just say I appreciated that they managed to do a Groundhog Day story without some of the normal trappings of a Groundhog Day story, because Doctor Who has done time loops before, obviously. But the way this one was done, and doing it really kind of Doctor Light, and focusing, on the horror of remembering that you're wiped out day after day after day after day. That was cool.
Yeah, I think this is everything I was wanting in a War Doctor Begins story. It is, well, he's not in it heavily once he gets involved. He's heavily involved. It's the Doctor trying to do the right thing, but still failing at it. And he's trying to save this planet, but unknowingly, and partially knowingly, just because he's trying to do this, putting the entire planet through hell. And that is the sort of moral dilemma that I feel like the War Doctor has had to tackle throughout the Time War. This is the sort of conflict that he's trying to do the right thing, but is also doing horrible things at the same time, trying to do the right thing. And this feels like it balances that line perfectly.
And the moral ambiguity of it.
Yes, and then the ending of where it's not entirely clear on if he comes back and saves them, or I walked away from it going, oh, well, he didn't figure out a way to do it, and they all died. And so this is another planet's death on his shoulders to wear him down to the point we see him later down the road.
I think they all but telegraphed that with the green line. I mean, the green line is him leaving, him running off, and they say that early on. She realizes that. Not I say early on. I mean earlier than the end, and so I think it sort of telegraphs that that's probably the conclusion you're meant to draw from it, is that he does get away, but does he come back and save them, or was that the only way that this could end? Because all of the weavings of time, the failed attempts, were what she said, blue and red, and there was the only one green. So,
yeah, but they didn't have to. The beauty of the ending being, I think, kind of ambiguous is they've certainly set us up. Yeah, no, I mean really.
No, it wasn't kind of ambiguous. It was ambiguous.
It was ambiguous, and they did that on purpose.
Yeah.
They have certainly set us up for failure.
Yeah.
They have shown us the thread. They have told us that, the only way this is going to work is if he leaves. And he does. And then the world ends. And it goes to silence. And so, it is ambiguous from the standpoint of, well, okay, did he make it back or not? And we get a long pause with no sound before the credits roll. They could have thrown another TARDIS noise coming in, as if he was coming back, which would have given us some hope. They could have, left with just the pow and, the destruction of everything, Dalek voices or whatever. But it's just silence. And for me, it's just as eerily effective as Urshock not having any music during the end credits. It's just kind of that kind of wham, potent moment. And I loved it. I love the fact that it's, open to interpretation, that you can kind of believe whatever you want.
And it's also open, as they say in the bonus features, they open it up to the fact of, okay, the War Doctor maybe couldn't solve this problem, but maybe a later incarnation, now that the 11th Doctor kind of remembers everything, maybe he goes back and fixes it after the fact.
Yeah.
And I like that idea too, because it still leaves the weight of what he did on the War Doctor, but allows the Doctor himself overall to possibly, save a planet when he thought he couldn't.
Another subroutine that the sonic screwdriver is running in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
So I left the end of this with the impression, at least personally, my canon for it, the impression that he does eventually, whether it be the War Doctor or whether it be, as you said, maybe a future incarnation of the Doctor, it goes back and does save them. And the reason that I came to that conclusion is because of the way they open this. The way they open this is her recounting the steps up to that day and then we don't get any of that sort of logging later. But that, to me, is her telling this story and setting us up, and then the story playing out, in just dialogue between the characters, but she's sort of kind of still telling this story. And to me, that's in the future beyond these events. And so that's why I kind of walked away with it as, am I meant to believe that perhaps he was successful to come back and save them? So that's where I sort of landed on it.
That's very clever. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, if she's narrating the story, she almost has to have survived it.
Yeah.
See, and I noticed that the narration stopped after the phone call with her mom.
Right.
So I got the impression that the narration was her telling her mom everything that had led up to that point.
Okay. That's a good point, too. I hadn't thought of that.
So that's one of the great things about this story, though, is that you can take it multiple different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I couldn't pick this story apart except for the one thing that just kept nagging me is this is like 430 times around that this had happened to them. And I think I got somewhere that everything kind of happens in the scope of about 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of thought, that's almost a lot of time. And maybe we're just at that very end where everybody's so wore down that they're just going through their normal routine every day. But part of me kind of felt like it was missing that groundhog element of trying other things, trying to leave, or try to just commit suicide before they even get there. Just something that was missing was that there weren't other efforts. It just felt like they were going through the motions every day, and it's not until she gets that glimpse of the lights at the castle that she decides to actually go and do something different. And it just doesn't seem like that would be 430 some times around that somebody would finally do that. But I'm not going to fault the story for that. That was just something I felt was missing that should have maybe either been addressed or looked at in some way or given an explanation for why.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of that in there. I saw a little less. That didn't really bother me, I guess, because they also had talked about, we're going to try using 4 nukes this time.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So it did feel like the main hub was trying new things, but they had almost become resigned to the fact of, there's no point anymore because everything we try to do isn't going to fix the problem.
Yeah.
I think part of this minor niggle.
and they seem to be a bit of a primitive. I mean, she talked about they use computers, but only what they need. So I suppose there's not like there's probably any sort of transport off of the planet either that they could have mass evacuated either. So I suppose they do give you enough of that explanation that they're a very simple race, that they probably wasn't much more they could do.
It almost feels like our own society, current day, trying to go up against Daleks.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have much luck either. Especially if these are new Daleks that, are even worse than what we've previously seen.
Right. Well, it's a good story. Good story, though.
The other great thing about this story, I think, is Ignis herself. The characterization and the writing and the acting of it is so well done that it sucked me in the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that as well. I thought she was a great character.
And I think would have made one of those characters that would have made a great companion.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she's very creative and very poetic, and I think just that's her position in the government too. And so the character's really kind of built around that idea, and it works really well.
Well, and the idea that this I forget their titles. Minister of Poetry.
Yeah.
Is now thrust into a higher position because of all of this thing. And how does someone like that deal with what they're dealing with in addition to the time loop is just, such cool ideas throughout the entire thing.
Hi, I'm Rupert Booth.
I am known as Paul Ferry.
My name is Barry Williams.
Together, we host Time Ram.
Time Ram's a cruel mistress.
It's a random number generator.
That also.
We roll a number from 1 to 13, and that's our doctor. Then 1 to 300 for the story, and then we ram them together.
Even if it doesn't make sense.
Cruel, I tell you.
Time Ram, putting the wrong doctors in the wrong stories, so you don't have to.
You're listening to Travelling the Vortex.
All right, well, what do we got coming up next on the schedule?
Okay, well, coming up next on the schedule, we have our some more 60th anniversary tie-in, which, for those of you that followed along last week, Glenn explained is we're kind of doing, I don't know, as a backdoor pilot, maybe is the wrong way of saying it, but we're doing a couple of comics that we have to read in order to get to the comics where Beep the Meep is introduced.
There you go.
So that we're ready for Beep the Meep when he shows up in one of the anniversary specials.
Yeah, there you go.
So, next week is The Iron Legion, which was originally published in Doctor Who Weekly from Panini, number 1 through 8, which is a 4th Doctor comic. And then the comic strip adaptations, Doctor Who and the Iron Legion, which is a Big Finish audio that covers the comic book. So we're pairing those two up to do a little compare and contrast. And I cannot wait. I'm so excited because I bought that Dave Gibbons collection at Planet Comic Con like 12 years ago. And I'm finally going to start reading it. It's been sitting on the shelf waiting, and I'm just like, yeah, baby.
Oh, Iron Legion is not in that one, by the way.
Yeah, it is. You don't think I haven't flipped through and looked at some of the pictures already? One does not own a Dave Gibbons collection for 12 years and not look at the pictures, Glenn. And then I believe the plan is to return to the world of The War Doctor Begins with the 4th box set, He Who Fights with Monsters.
That is correct.
So that is coming up next.
And you can find us at our website, travelingthevortex.com. If you get any value out of this podcast, why not consider putting some value back into it? You can do that by clicking on the Patreon link and consider supporting us. When you become a patron of this podcast, you unlock more audios and specials from us. And we just uploaded our most recent Great Traveling the Vortex Doctor Who quiz and trivia quiz. And that's number 4. And I took the mic again this time. And we want to pop in there and see what you can get right. Let us know. If you could give even just a few dollars a month, that helps us keep the lights on here. Also, consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to this podcast. And then make sure you join in the conversations on our listeners forum on Facebook. Anything else we need to do before we close this one? If not, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.